Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. You know, third episode this weekend already. You guys are so freaking lucky to have me as a host, I swear to God. But I am happy to be back here, freezing my ass off once again in this northeast cold, to bring you guys some great content and to talk to some amazing people. And today's guest is definitely not an exception to that. I am being joined by Sean Blackwell, who is an author of two books that I haven't read them, but they look incredibly amazing. I actually would love to read them. The newest one, though, is Bipolar Awakenings, The Quest to Heal Bipolar Disorder, which that's a mission in itself right there, and I respect the hell out of it. Welcome, Sean. Glad to have you on the show.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I'm glad we could. This is a conversation I feel when you messaged me, this is a conversation I felt need to be had. So I was like, you know what? This is paranormal enough that I can actually make it work. So let's do this. I love a good science
Yeah,
paranormal topic. So
yeah. I don't
let
deal
me
with a
ask
lot of ghosts, but I think a lot of what I do is paranormal. It's certainly not normal. And yeah,
paranormal.
so
Paranormal is a lot more than just ghosts. Do not let my intro video scare you off. There's a lot more to
thanks.
paranormal than
Hey, best intro video I could ever imagine. That was awesome.
Thank you, Rob Wild of Antisocial Network, for making that for me.
Yeah,
I
terrific, terrific.
It is a pretty awesome video. But let me start us off the same way I start every interview off. What got you into spirituality? What made you want to walk down that path?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, you'd probably have to go back to my infancy, but I went to Catholic schools and I always sort of had a interest in that area and I minored in religious studies when I was in university. When I was there, I was sort of studying my religion and actually in university, I was trying to find the right one, to be quite honest. I left confused, but I got into advertising and that just didn't fit right. And eventually, I ended up in the psychiatric hospital myself. I had a very intensive experience that happened on a self help seminar, 3-day thing called the Landmark Forum. And in the middle of that, we were doing an intensive meditation, only 5 minutes on our fear. And focusing on my fear, I remembered a scuba diving accident I had had just about 2 months earlier. And with that, I felt this punch in my chest and I burst into tears. And I just felt this flood of fear come over me that I had blocked. It was like a trauma response, or I had released trauma from that scuba diving accident because I almost died. I was about 90 feet below sea level and I lost my weight belt.
Ooh,
So, and that became a mystical experience for me. I had feelings of oneness, feelings like I finally had new things that I never knew before, like a sense of all knowingness, sense of connectedness, and everything got a little bit dreamlike. So that was what put me in the psychiatric hospital. I thought I actually, at one point, after 4 days, I actually thought I had died and that I was in a kind of a purgatory. And then when the police came and arrested me, because I was in a hotel ballroom, I had taken all my clothes off, I had peed on the carpet there, and all thinking I was being tested by God. And then the police came, insisted I put on my clothes, and when I refused, they grabbed me, and I still thought they were taking me to heaven. But it took a few days, but I recovered very quickly, and it was actually a big breakthrough for me. It ended kind of depression, mild depression that I've been going through for the previous 7 years. So that's sort of that was the first thing that happened in 1996. Yeah.
well, I gotta say that actually is one hell of a story. I mean,
Boom.
the, I love the whole. I love that you predated Vern Troyer and pulling the whole taking your clothes off and peeing on the carpet thing. So I love that.
Right.
But if you haven't seen Surreal Life, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, Mini Me did that in a corner of a room of Surreal Life. It was hilarious.
Oh,
But
okay.
but that's I mean, wow, that's quite an event. I can't say I ever had anything like that happen to me personally. Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
not true. I've done. I've got. There's been some points where I got naked, but I never got arrested. So
Okay. Yeah. It's a pretty loaded first 2 minutes for your interview, though, isn't it? It's like,
Oh,
what do
I
I do
love
with
it.
this?
Oh no, I love it. So
Yeah.
when you eventually, I'm assuming you get released from the psychiatric hospital,
Yeah.
and
I was released very quickly because I thought I was going to heaven and then, or some kind of nirvana or samadhi. I had a lot of Buddhist influence back then too. And then, but after 4 days, I realized that my situation wasn't changing, that still seemed to be in this psychiatric hospital. So, and my family was there. And I started to sort of break the delusion that I had died. And I thought, well, I don't know what's going on, but I need to get out of this hospital. So I was very lucky because I got out within 4 days. But once I got out, I felt a lot better. I was more vulnerable, but I was like, "Oh, this was the best thing that ever happened to me." Even though my family was mortified, terrified, scared, but I was feeling like,
I'm
"No, this is
sure.
really good." And a year later, I found the work of a guy named Dr. Stan Groff, and he had coined this term spiritual emergency, where he said, look, there's these people who go into what seems like psychosis or schizophrenia, but it actually can be very beneficial to people if they let it play out. And sometimes it mirrors psychosis, like you can't tell the difference. And so I thought to myself, well, that's what happened to me. I had a spiritual emergency. I didn't have this thing, psychosis, you know. But then it was 10 years later that I met my wife, who's Brazilian. I moved to Brazil. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, right? I'm in Brazil. I'm working as an English teacher, and then we get a call from her family, where one of her nieces, my wife's nieces, had an experience, and I was like, "Well, this sounds like what happened to me," and it was being labeled bipolar disorder. And we went up to support her in the opposite of psychiatry, and we did pretty well. She recovered quite quickly, but they still medicated her. They said it was probably bipolar. And then that put me on a mission. It was like, well, what's the difference between bipolar and what happened to me? Because most people with bipolar, they get medicated for life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I've talked about it on the show before, but yeah, the mental health, behavioral health, what do you call it? Field in this country, well, in the United States, and I'm sure Canada, is their diagnosis for everything is, oh, just feed them pills until they stop doing what they're doing. If that one doesn't work, find another one. Oh, that one
Yeah.
doesn't work either. Okay, give them a stronger one. Like
Yeah.
they don't see yet. Well, they're starting to, and people are reaching out independently. But the major doctor side of it, the major clinical side of it, doesn't see that the spiritual world can people in the spiritual world who have abilities can help with these things, and they usually can find a solution faster than any pill will, and it won't damage your system and completely destroy you like pills will. So I agree. I mean, that's their solve for this is always just feed them pills.
Yeah. I see it as just a huge conflict in paradigms to a certain degree. If you're like a scientific materialist kind of person, the pills have to be the answer. It has to be genetic. But if you look at the actual symptoms of what people go through. Like, for example, when people go into psychosis, and I'm just using the medical terms so people understand what I'm talking about. Okay,
Yeah, of
I don't
course.
think of it as the same thing as a psychiatrist, but there's basically 13 spiritual delusions. And when I give people a questionnaire and say, okay, what did you experience? Everybody who goes into psychosis, who reaches out to me, will feel like they're dead, dying, or being reborn. They're on a special mission from God. They thought they were Jesus or Buddha or some kind of Messiah. Maybe they're giving birth to Jesus. They're in a battle between good and evil. These kinds of things, you know. So it's inherently, the psychosis has inherent spiritual content, or it flips to paranoia. The police are after me, cameras are everywhere, the demons are following me, these kind of things, you know.
Which I mean, it's funny because both those do fall in the paranormal like spiritual realm because it's yeah.
Sure.
If you because I think what it really comes down to is what what hormones, what chemicals in your brains are affected when you have the psychosis. It's if you're better chemicals are activated, then yeah, you're going to heaven, or that you're going to meet God, or that you're Jesus. I mean, we've all seen that glorified out in movies and made to look way worse than it is. But on the other side, yeah, that's when you get the people who get paranoid and violent and are basically become conspiracy theorists to the fullest degree, with the aluminum hat included. So
Mm.
it's it's scary. It's a scary thing when that happens to people, and I mean, it's really just an imbalance of chemicals. That's all it really comes down to. But why are they imbalanced? That's the question,
Well,
and
well,
that
but you got to, yeah. Well, why are they imbalanced? And the first thing is that term, chemical imbalance theory. Okay, so if you look at it from that paradigm, the first question you need to ask yourself is, okay, where's the medical exam? Because this is supposed to be an imbalance of dopamine or serotonin, generally, right? And what the medical exams show, and this is from the work of Dr. Robert, or not Dr. Robert Whitaker. He's a journalist from the Boston Globe. He has a website called Mad in America. And he reported after his thorough investigation that the research indicates that the range of serotonin and dopamine that people with so-called mental disorders have is the same range as every other person. Some people have more than others. People with disorders have more than others. So this whole chemical imbalance thing is it's a myth. It's a myth. There's no science to back that up. Okay. But that doesn't mean there isn't something that needs to be taken seriously, because people can get themselves into deep trouble. I mean, I've met people who've walked out into traffic, just believing God was going to take them across the street. And then one guy in particular, he got his foot run over. I think he might have, no, he got his foot run over. So just because it doesn't have a biochemical origin, you know, and there's a biological reaction for sure. But in my opinion, we have a deeper, you might say, soul. I use the term kundalini or chakra system, but it's soul, and that the issues are coming from the soul level or the bioenergetic level. That's where I'm coming from, anyways.
which I mean, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, instead of a chemical imbalance, it's a spiritual imbalance.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
and I mean that's when you need to talk to a clairvoyant, a psychic, a medium, a healer, just a Reiki master, someone who has the ability to look inside you and to find out what's going on in your chakra, like you said, in your spirit, and see where your chakra is really off balance, because it's obviously off balance somewhere. I mean, and who's to say it's not a chemical imbalance too? Because I mean, we don't know what 80% of the brain does, so I'm sure part of the brain that we don't really know what it does yet. I'm sure that's connected to spirit, and we just haven't figured out how or why or what yet. It's just we probably we'll probably figure that out in the next couple hundred years at some point. But as of right now, no, the doctors aren't even looking at that. They don't.
yeah. They
They
can't
would
find
consider
it.
they would consider it a joke. I mean, doctors,
Yeah,
if it's not in the textbook, most doctors won't consider it. So
yeah. But I've had physical experiences, like somatic experiences, all along the chakra line. You know, the heart explosion when I got hospitalized myself. Sometimes working with other people, I'll have strong pressure at the sixth chakra there. Other times it's sexual, it's second chakra, So, and I'm not, for your audience, I'm not Hindu. I've got education in Eastern spirituality, but I just see that sort of bioenergetic system, something like a chakra system, seems to be what's going on, because this is what people report when they go into non-ordinary states. They have these very powerful somatic experiences, of the body, physical stuff happens with people. And when I work with people, that's what I do. I work with them on a somatic level. Instead of trying to get them to talk about their problems, we just get down on the yoga mat after some good orientation and training. We get down on the yoga mat, and I take clients into non-ordinary states, people with bipolar disorder. You know,
interesting. But I do want to finish your tale here. Um,
sure.
because it's always important to know where it came from. So, when did you start practicing as a healer? When did that start?
Right. Well, the first step started with my nieces. But then I read a book about what they call a place in San Francisco from the late 1970s, early 80s called Soteria House. And back then, there was a group of pioneering psychiatrists and psychologists who picked up on the work of a British guy named R.D. Laing. And then the guy here in the United States was a guy named Lauren Mosher. And he was a psychiatrist. And what they realized was that the intention of psychosis is to reorganize the psyche. And so that if you just support these people with empathy, if you give them that empathy, they'll come through psychosis within about 6 days, as long as you keep them protected. And Dr. John Weir Perry as well, Dr. Lauren Mosher, Dr. John Weir Perry in San Francisco. They both reported an 85% success rate in just allowing people to go through these processes medication free. And that works for the first episode or two. But once people get into a fourth or fifth or sixth episode, it gets tougher. So I started looking at it. I was thinking, well, I'm not able to work with people in their first episodes because they go straight to the psychiatric hospital. So what can I do with this work to help people who are further along into their fifth or sixth episode? I've had bipolar disorder for 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
And then looking at my background, I had studied a little bit of what they call holotropic breath work with Dr. Stan Groff, Czech psychiatrist Dr. Stan Groff. Sorry, I'm dropping a lot of names on you, but these are big names. Lauren
good.
Mosher from Soteria House, Dr. John Weir Perry from Diabasis, and then Czech psychiatrist and founder of transpersonal psychology, Stan Groff. Okay. And Stan had a technique called holotropic breath work that I'd studied with him. I'd gone and done some work with him where you instead of psychedelic therapy, you breathe yourself into non-ordinary states, and then physically, and then what he believed was happening was a healing an inner healer would come through and bring up unconscious material for you to work through somatically, like of the body. Okay. So I went to one of his workshops and did that in 97. And then I thought maybe that might be a technique to use with people with bipolar. But it was contraindicated because they were worried about holotropic breath work opening up a deeper process with people who had deeper issues to deal with, like you would if you had a disorder. Because the assumption from this whole school of all these psychiatrists and psychologists that I mentioned is that the roots of the disorder are not in a chemical imbalance, but they're rooted in trauma. So if you can lift that trauma, which is in this bioenergetic system, then they can heal, And so I started experimenting almost right away with a few people I met online, trying to support them through psychosis, giving them a little bit of breath work, even though I was pretty untrained at that point. Once they were in psychosis, I just suggest they breathe stronger and started experimenting from there. And that was 2007, And I really didn't know what I was doing back then.
Well, I mean, I'm sure 20 years later, you're a damn near expert in it. So, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So,
you can never be an entire expert in this field, but I do my best.
Well, for those of us who don't know, what's the normal course of action for a medical doctor in Western world for bipolar disorder?
Well, probably the family or the police have brought you in, and once you've settled down enough from the medications they've forced on you, you'll sit down with him, and then you'll start talking. And if it's mania, you're gonna show things like pressured speech, like talking really fast. You're not listening to instructions. You might have a lot of business ideas, these kind of things. A feeling of elation. You feel great when you're in hypomania. You feel amazing, and everybody else is worried about you. And then on the other end, there's the depression where you feel terrible. I think everybody knows a little bit about depression, but everybody else is like, well, at least they're grounded, so they feel a little bit better, And then He would tell you, the psychiatrist, the more you talk, the more medication you're going to get if you really open up about what you're talking about. And you're going to get an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer and maybe some lithium and be sent on your way. And that's going to be the rest of your life. That's the typical psychiatric way. And they might say, oh, you can go get some therapy too, but without the meds, you're lost. That's pretty much the psychiatric idea.
And from those who I've known a few with bipolar over the years.
So it's very common.
The yeah, I mean the ones I have known, finding the right medication balance is damn near impossible. It's a hard thing to find the perfect medication balance.
Yeah, it is. It's really tough. I don't even know if you could, what would describe as the perfect balance, because they all bring symptoms and they all leave you feeling less than optimal, you know.
Of course. I mean, so and of course, I mean, what they're saying by doing this type of process is that they believe bipolar to be incurable, which obviously you believe that's not true, right?
Right. I don't think it's true. And the reason is, once the first insight I had was that um, I started making a lot of videos on YouTube. And my first video, and it's still there, you can find it, was called Am I Bipolar or Waking Up? You'll find me with a lot more hair back when I was 20 years ago, or 18 years ago. And I told my story online. And then I just had a flood of people in the comments section saying, wow, what happened to you is so similar to what happened to me. And I'm medicated for life. That's the other person would say, I'm medicated for life. And once I got into it, I saw that there was no clear dividing line between what I went through and what they went through, but they tended to have more difficult lives. I mean, I had a little bit of trauma in my life, but some people, dealing with heavy physical abuse, sexual abuse, that's nothing like I had to deal with.
Yeah.
And in general, people with more trauma had more difficult psychosis, they have more difficulty coping and that kind of thing. But in terms of like, what's the dividing line between, well, this is spiritual emergency and this is bipolar disorder, I thought the two things were worlds apart when I read it in 97. But then once I started talking to people on YouTube in 2007, I realized that there was just this huge gray area. And so if there was a huge gray area, then I thought, well, what if some of these people in the gray area could be helped? And that's when I started to move into that territory, you know.
Is it exactly? I mean, and so in your book, you talk about how you believe bipolar episodes are caused by the trauma that creates bioenergetic blockages,
That's it. That's it.
and how
Yeah. One more time.
how do these how do these blockages, like how do they cause the mania, the psychosis, or even the depression?
It's a bit of a mystery. I think that there's just a natural flow of our life. This is my hypothesis at this point, and I think the sort of mystics of old would kind of agree with this, that there's supposed to be like an energy flow going through your system, like a kundalini process. Okay, kundalini is like your life force. All right, and it runs through this chakra system. This is all East Indian stuff. Okay, but when that system has too many blockages, then we start to project what's going on inside. And once we start projecting what's going on inside, we can kind of, the world becomes almost like a dream world. And we start to feel like we're dreaming, you know. And that's how it starts, I think. It's just this huge disruption in this Kundalini process. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's and the Kundalini process is, it can get intricate. It can be very complicated because there's a lot we don't understand about it yet. We're still
Sure.
No one in the world is an expert on it yet. It's still a newly talked about thing, really. I mean, yeah, people have been talking about it since the '90s, '80s, but it didn't get the online awareness. It didn't get the mass awareness it has nowadays because of the spiritual world. People awakening over the last decade and a half has been phenomenally huge, and now there's more people than ever that actually believe when someone talks about this type of stuff. When back in the day, we would all have been called crazy for talking about it. So
Yeah. There's a guy named Gopi Krishna. And he was a businessman in India who, in his 40s, I think, started to dedicate himself to God. Okay. So he just started meditating every single day. He had this huge breakthrough. His tongue was so hot, he just kept drinking water day after day after day, and it was insatiable thirst. He realized he was in a Kundalini awakening. This is in the 1930s, okay? He knew he was in a Kundalini awakening, and he started to reach out to all the gurus in India. You know, they got gurus all over India. He couldn't find a single guru who had been through a Kundalini process in India in the 1930s. And yet people call me with these Kundalini symptoms all the time. This is just a standard thing that's going on here. And I would say most people in North America, anyways, Europe and the United States, they haven't heard of Kundalini. They don't know what that is. You know, I'm sure your viewers have heard it, or listeners have heard of it, but most do not know. And most, if they have a Christian background, are often afraid of it. They think it's the work of the devil or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, not gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
I went down that worm. I went down that wormhole twice yesterday. Organized religion has destroyed and made it very hard to bring anything Eastern over to this part of the world. That's for damn sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's tough.
so, so tell us about your first client that you had once you started healing.
Right.
Um,
And yeah, I'll just get into it.
yeah,
Um,
sounds very interesting. So I'm dying to hear a deeper background on it.
yeah, well, this is where I started to make this Kundalini link really in a tangible way. And the reason was that in part of my own personal development, I recognized that as long as I wasn't really getting the results I wanted, like the ideal results I wanted doing this work, that I needed to keep doing my own personal work. In other words, I needed to keep healing myself. Even though I wasn't at risk to go back to the psychiatric hospital, I needed to keep working on clearing out my energetic blockages, you know, clearing out my Kundalini and that kind of thing. So in 2009, I went on a 10-day meditation retreat, which is very intensive, 10 hours of meditating a day, 10 days. Okay. And on the fourth day, I had another huge Kundalini surge. Huge energy goes from my belly up into my heart, through my head. I start crying. I'm freezing cold in a warm room full of meditators. All my organs are shaking. Okay. And I needed 5 days to get grounded again. They invited me to leave the retreat. I said, I can't leave. I have to stay here, but I couldn't meditate. It's very powerful, you know. And that was what you would call a Kundalini awakening. In a sense, it was stronger than what put me in the psychiatric hospital. But because I knew what was going on, it was easier for me because I knew I was in a Kundalini process, so I didn't get delusional. Right now, that experience left me with a pain in my coccyx, in the tailbone. Okay, I would tell my wife I felt like I'd grown a 2-inch tail. I needed a cushion in my car when I was driving my car, okay, because of the pain I was dealing with down there. Um, then I get into 2013 and I decided that there was one woman in Romania that would pay me for what I do. And that's when I needed to start my business. I had seen a video on YouTube that said, all you need to start a business is one person to pay you for what you do. And I had these grandiose plans. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start with the one person I know will pay me for what I do. And it was Livia in Romania. And as we start talking about her process, just preparing, because she had translated my YouTube videos into Romanian, I'd known her for a while. But then she starts telling me about this coccyx pain she's got. She couldn't lay on her back in a bed. She had to sleep on her side. She couldn't sit in a chair for more than 10 minutes. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe it's related. Maybe my Kundalini process with the coccyx is related to hers, you know, and this hypothesis I've got is really got some validation here. So I fly from Brazil to Romania. I hadn't been to Europe since I was 18. Now I'm like 46 and I'm going to Romania of all places, near Transylvania. And I meet her and she had a pretty heavy history. She'd been in the psychiatric hospital like 10 years in a row. 10 like and 6 consecutive years of hospitalizations that could last over a month. but she was a warrior, and she loved my work. So I went out there. I had done some breathwork training. I had like towards certification by that point. And so we started doing the breathwork with her. And I should explain a little bit about what the holotropic breathwork principles are, because
Yeah.
what I'm doing isn't exactly like holotropic breathwork, but it's sort of similar. What we do is we lay the client down on a yoga mat. We'll play music that's very evocative in the beginning, strong drumming in the beginning, then it gets more emotional and then relaxing. I'll give the client a relaxation exercise, and then I encourage them to breathe in a way that is aggressive but not overwhelming, but at their own pace. So there's no specific breathing technique. All right. So for me, I would breathe like in breath work, I would breathe like that. Other people breathe through the nose. My nose is burnt. I can see that, by the way. I was in the sun yesterday. Um, and so, anyways, I get Livia doing the breath work. She was going into non-ordinary states, but and then once you're there with the music, you're supposed to express yourself like physically. If you feel, for example, like you're becoming a bear inside, like you have a bear come up, like a bear archetype, you might say, then you should act like a bear, like, "Roar," this kind of thing. If you feel like you want a hug from your mother, you could turn to the facilitator and ask for a hug, and the facilitator can hug you in a protective way that's not invasive. We put pillows around sex organs and things like that. I'm giving you the crash course in holotropic breathwork here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. But she would have pretty quiet sessions. She wouldn't move too much. And that's very common for people who, ironically, when you've got bipolar disorder, you've had trouble expressing yourself your entire life. That's what all bursts out when you're in mania. But then
Yeah.
once the meds everything gets tamped down. And so she had some pretty quiet sessions. And then we got into about the fifth session. She didn't move a muscle. I thought nothing was going on. And she gets up off the mat after 30 minutes. A typical holotropic breathwork session is 3 hours, but her sessions could only last about 30 minutes. And she says to me, she says, Sean, during that session, I felt hot fire come out of my coccyx, up my spine, into my shoulder blades, and out to my hands. I've got warm hands for the first time in my life, and my coccyx pain is gone. She had been to 6 doctors for this coccyx pain. There's a car alarm outside, by the way. Sorry about that.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah. She had been to 6 doctors about this coccyx pain, and after our 5th breathwork session, it was permanently removed. Eventually, well, I did 2 retreats with her, and then she was able to go off medications for 5 years. Then the episodes started happening again, but she had, for the first time in her life, 5 years of medication-free living.
Well, that's amazing. And I mean, I feel like that's a Eastern. I feel like that's a European thing where like you don't show emotion, you don't like react to things. So I could see why she'd be quiet all the sessions and not really moving, because I think it's kind of bred into them that you are supposed to just sit still and be regal in Europe. Like everybody's still raised that way.
Well, especially in Eastern Europe, definitely there is that culture. But
Yeah.
what I've seen in working with people though is that when you've got bipolar disorder, people tend to have a lot of quiet sessions initially. It seems like that's the time when your kundalini or chakra system is getting reconnected to itself. Then once that system is this is my thinking after watching people. Then after that system is connected, then the emotions start to surface and people get more practice in expressing themselves, you know.
Yeah, it makes sense. It really does. It does make sense. And so when someone's having a really severe crisis, is the breath work safe for them, or is that going to put them in any kind of actual medical danger if they try to do the breath work while they're basically flipping out?
Actually, when they're in that space, like the whole point of the breath work is to get you into a non-ordinary state, okay? In a protected way. So but it's not the same as psychosis, because with psychosis, you're 100% there. You're in that other dimension. With breath work, you're in 2 worlds at the same time. You're here and you're there. So you'll see people on the breathwork mat and they'll be like, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, okay. And then they go to the bathroom and then they come back. Okay, thanks. And then they lay back down again and, this kind of thing. So it's you're really in the two worlds at once. You're here and you're in that dream or spiritual dimension, quantum dimension. That's a popular word these days. Um, so when someone's in psychosis, they don't need breath work. They're already over there. Then if it's a first or second episode, you can just support them in an empathetic way. And that relationship you can have really helps if you can stay warm. But most people want to take control. They want to sort of grab hold of the situation, and that doesn't help. That doesn't help the situation. Um, yeah,
I can imagine. I mean,
yeah,
I can imagine. And so, I mean, so basically, what I'm gathering from all this is that when we start acting like this, or especially when we have psychosis moments like this, it's
right.
because there's something off with our spirit, our chakras, our soul,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's our body trying to tell us that, but a lot of people don't know
yeah,
to listen to it.
right. And trying to work towards healing. Trying to work towards healing.
Of course, I mean,
Yeah. I was
we all
like,
want to be. Well, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say
I was,
I was
you go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was I was just gonna say we all need to be healed of our afflictions, whether they be on the physical, emotional, spiritual plane, mental plane, wherever they be laying. We all need to work on our pain because everybody has pain of some kind, whether they show it or not.
I completely agree, and I see people with disorders as basically normal, regular people who maybe they're a little bit more empathetic or like emotionally sensitive. Maybe they're a little bit more artistic, but they've definitely absorbed more pain than they can deal with, and that's what brings
Hmm.
about the disorder. Just to get back to this one idea of working towards healing, I did work with one guy in psychosis some years ago. One of the first people I worked with, and we had a shaman friend, and we could take him out to her property. Right away, he wanted to take his clothes off. We just let him go. Sure, I was there supporting him with my wife, and they had a tennis court in their backyard, and he's jogging around the tennis court naked in the rain. Okay. And then he goes over to these leaves and he starts eating leaves off the plants like in the backyard. And I just came out and I said, "David, what are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm purifying myself. When dogs want to purify their stomachs, they eat leaves." I said, "Are
Hmm.
you sure those leaves aren't poisonous?" He says, "I don't think so." I said, "Okay." And I just let him sit there and eat leaves. And
Yeah.
when he was
If it
finished
ain't,
eating, yeah, naked in the rain, you know.
I was gonna say, was he playing La Vida Loca at the same time? Because I mean, she'll make you want to take your clothes off and dance in the rain.
Well, when you give people permission to really let go and give them a safe space, they will take it further. They will take it further, and it's almost like your soul just goes, "Finally, I can go wild." Like this is great. You know,
And
uh,
yeah, and which it's a release that everybody needs. Most of us, most of us only need to a certain point where we can do it on our own in our home, a place we feel safe. Uh, Others, they don't have the release. Either they don't have a home type situation where they feel actually freedom, or they don't feel like that they're able to be themselves in their home situation, or they just can't release for some reason, and that's the blockage we're talking about is when you can't release it for some reason.
right. And when I work with people, the first thing we got to establish is, do we have a safe space to do the work? And it's tricky because the safe space, it needs to be a place where you can make a lot of noise, but you're not going to bother your neighbors. And the neighbors are not going to bother you. So you need to have total silence and you need to be able to make a lot of noise. So it basically brings it down to basements and country houses, and that's about it. Those are the only places I've worked.
Well, there's a reason a lot of these healing establishment businesses are usually in remote locations because the you want the privacy. You want to be a place where you could be out and do what you got to do, no matter what it is, in nature, away from everybody else. Because honestly, this world is so freaking overpopulated that it's hard to escape other people. It really is. I mean,
Sure,
hell,
sure.
I,
And
I, I
we've
can't I can't be home without being around four other people at all times. So I mean, yeah, it is what it
yeah.
is.
I've taken a few international clients from Europe and the U.S. to basically a resort, a farmhouse out here in Brazil. That the house sleeps 20. It's a huge property. It's surrounded by mountains. When people are there, they just love it, man. And we could do it for $250 a night, which you couldn't do that in the United States. It would be probably $5,000 a night for a place like this.
Oh yeah, if
Um,
you find a place like that in Airbnb in the middle of the country, it's going to be up there,
yeah,
especially here because they're going to make it all fancied out with all the big screen TVs and the hot tubs and everything else you want for a. I mean, up here it'd be a vacation thing. Nobody would
sure,
just
sure,
sell it as a resort space unless that's what that
right,
as a healing space
yeah.
unless that's what that was intended for. But I mean,
Yeah,
so
so getting in nature is terrific. But also, I did a retreat in Brooklyn, New York, just a couple of years ago.
oh really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Basement.
that's a. I mean, I guess that's possible. I mean, it's possible. Basements can be good places, but I mean, just Brooklyn. My God, I've been to Brooklyn. It's a very condensed place. There's people on
Oh
top,
yeah,
people on top, of people everywhere.
yeah. Diker Heights. I was in Diker Heights, Brooklyn, New York, working in the basement. Oh, the work went fine. Work went well.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's people make do when they have wherever they have to at times. I mean,
Right, right, right,
what you
right.
expect in this world? But so I know we kind of talked about this a little in the beginning, but what what would you say is the biggest thing that the modern medical society needs to admit to and open their eyes to kind of bring the East and Western medicine worlds together?
Well, I think their big facade is that they've got all the answers. I went to a psychiatric conference once, and the first speaker gets up and says, "We know what we're doing." And I was just like, "That's the most insecure thing I've ever heard a medical professional say." We know what we're doing. Really? Doesn't seem like you know what you're doing. They need to
Yeah,
open up, be more inquisitive. And funny enough, in 2023, I went to a conference at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and it was opened. It was on psychosis and spirituality, and it was opened by the president of the American Psychiatric Association. So, can you imagine that? It's like they're finally opening the doors to acknowledging spirit, but they have a difficult time. You see, one of the issues for science is that religion has a lot of myth. You know,
yeah.
Jesus making bread out of whatever, what was he making? Bread out of
What are
fishes? I don't know. Water in the
what what
wine.
what are in the wine? And
Yeah,
he made one loaf of bread and one fish into enough to feed hundreds of people.
yeah. Virgin birth, died 3 days later, he got up. Science has a problem with that, and they should, because scientifically that's impossible, right? So that sort of thing, they don't really understand how you can have an authentic spiritual base without falling into religious myth or religious dogma, which can lead to things like racism. You know, if you're not part of my religion, well, then I guess you're going to hell. Bye, ciao. These are the things that
Mm-hmm.
science was a progression from. That kind of thinking. But there is a spiritual dimension that we can open up to, and you can experience it yourself. If you do breath work, if you sit down and meditate for a long period of time, you can have strong experiences come through that are decidedly you feel a body intelligence taking place beyond your own brain. We can put it that way.
Yeah, but
You know,
I'm gonna go back to the medical thing for a second because
sure.
well, I think, I mean, in my opinion, or at least from what I could tell, one of the biggest reasons that Eastern medicine is rejected by the Western world is because the health insurance companies don't want to pay for it, and they don't know how they would pay for it, and they think that they're going to lose money if people embrace these methods that actually heal without having to buy pills every month than keep buying pills.
You make a good point. What I suggest, though, in my book, at the end of my book, that the turning point is going to come when insurance companies pick this up, because who's paying for all the medications are not the people with the disorders, it's the insurance companies.
Yep.
So to me, it's in the best interest of the insurance companies to be searching for alternative methods. And that is already happening in some areas. I know of a program going on in the Netherlands where the insurance companies are allowing people to choose the alternative methods that they want. You know, now the only trouble is that if you open things up to alternative methods, how do you screen for just pure quackery? You know,
The
you know,
charlatans of the world, yeah.
yeah, I could give you some sugar pills and charge you $500 for those, and maybe I put a spell on them or something, and away you go. Um, it's we need a little bit more sophistication around like what's authentic spiritual experience and what's religious dogma or religious myth,
I
or
I
just plain superstition. You know.
I mean, the way I could see it working actually one day, if the insurance companies actually would ever come around to this, which I don't have my hopes high on that one, but
Mhm.
the way I could see it working is there would have to, same as there's a American Medical Association, there would have to be associations that would actually license people to do this work, and insurance wouldn't cover it unless one of these organizations licensed the person and the person's approved by that organization. That way, and I'm sure, and there'd be regular check-ins, there'd be regular audits to make sure that they are still doing all the principles and not just there to collect the money. I mean,
Well,
there's enough doctors that do that already. Like there's enough real doctors that just are there to
yeah.
collect the money and they don't give a shit about their patients.
Yeah, I do think that the next step, certainly for my work, I want things to go to an institutional level. Um, but to give you an idea of what's gone on, I had three dreams for my work. Okay, first one, work with people who had some cash, because most people with bipolar disorder, they're kind of poor. They've lost their jobs, they've lost their families. They're in difficult situations. So to find a client that can actually pay would be nice. Like celebrities who could also get the workout. Second, have it endorsed by psychiatry. And then the third would be to have some of my clients do the same work that I do for other people, because that's me doing the work. So last month, I had a psychiatrist in the Netherlands recommend a famous athlete, a retired athlete, not to me, but to a former client of mine who's now a therapist. And he did the retreat. He did the retreat. So all of a sudden, I'm taking people who are medicated for life and turning them into therapists who can help other people. And at least once so far, it's been endorsed by psychiatry in the
Well,
Netherlands, which is a huge thing for me. It's a huge
that,
thing
that
for me.
that's freaking huge. That's phenomenal. I mean, because to change someone from a patient into a teacher is the goal of every profession on this earth. Is you want to change those who you help to become actually the next level of teachers. And
Yeah,
doctors do this. I mean, doctors do the same thing. They want to have those that heal eventually be like, I want to be what this man is because he helped me, and I think I could help other people by moving his path forward. And on the spiritual side, you need that because networks are everything on the spiritual side. You can't just go on Instagram and Facebook and start posting like, "Oh, I can heal you," because people are going to think you're crazy, or B, there's already so many charlatans out there, they're going to think you're one of them. And I mean,
right,
trust
right.
me, I'm sure, like everybody else, I get the messages on Instagram all the time. Oh, I can give you a reading today for $5. I've been drawn to you. Yeah,
Sure.
okay. I'm not falling for that blarkey.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I would say most of my clients over the years didn't come from my work on you. I've done endless videos on YouTube, got 25,000 subscribers. Most of my clients have come after they Googled one thing, healing bipolar disorder, and they found an article from a client of mine, Monica Kettler, that's on Mad in America. And most of my clients have come from that one article because they read that and they go, wow, if you healed her like that, I want you to help me heal, you know. And she
Proof
works
of,
as a therapist now too.
I mean, proof of work. That's every business has that. You have to prove your
Yeah.
work. I mean, anybody in construction, anybody in any kind of hands-on work has to prove what they've done in the past. Otherwise, if you never built a house, why should I trust you to build mine? Like it's that ideology.
Yeah. But it's a little like I think a good analogy for where I'm at is I'm at a little bit like the Wright brothers stage. Like I'm telling people we can
Mm,
fly, and my planes are getting up in the air and they're landing, but nobody's booking a package to Florida to the Caribbean with me. You know what I mean?
exactly.
It's
I mean,
it takes an adventurous first group to sort of be part of the work. You know?
and I yeah, and I got one last question that I'm gonna finish this up with, and I think it's gonna be the best one we've had, the best part of the conversation so far.
Okay.
Are those
And I
people?
want to
Are the
tell a
people?
little story before when I finish. I want to tell a
Oh,
little story, but go ahead, ask
okay,
the
yeah,
question. Yeah.
that's a good way to end it. I love that. Uh,
Okay.
are there people out there that once the healing process starts, they'll become afraid to heal because it's changing everything they know?
Yes, great question. Yeah. You can you can hit a point in the healing process where just your psyche goes, I'm not going there. Boop, that's it. And they lock up. And it took me a long time to understand that at that point you don't push. You say, okay. And we just leave it there, let them integrate, let them go, and then you can come back to it when they're ready, you know. So healing really is a long process. You know, I was doing retreats of 10 days with people, and that's all that people could take was about 10 days of work with me. And most of the people who had the most success did 2 retreats a year apart. They did the best. But it would take some time because you're undoing a lifetime of trauma, even going back into the pre-birth process, even before you were born, this stuff can be starting, you know. So yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And it takes some time, but it can happen, you know. It's not an overnight miracle, but it's a miracle.
I mean, I'm sure it's anybody who goes through any type of healing process. There's always those that draw back in fear because it's the change of the norm. So I figured that might be something you've come across in your work.
For sure, for sure. Can I tell my
But
little story about why I'm wearing my
oh, well,
jersey?
I was just going to say that. Go ahead.
I know you're in Massachusetts, but I'm wearing number 12. Do you remember this guy? Do you remember Terry Bradshaw from the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Oh, I know. Yes, I do.
You know Terry Bradshaw? Little story from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They started in 1935, and between 1935 and the year Terry Bradshaw was drafted, he was a number 1 draft quarterback for them, okay? For those who don't know. Between 1945 and 1935 and 1970, they won 0 playoff games. Only went to the playoffs once in 1947 in all those years, okay? After he joined the team, they had a number of other All Stars or Hall of Fame players join the team. Obviously, they won 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. They started a dynasty. After that, they became the winningest team in the history of the NFL. They've been to the playoffs 34 times and won 2 more Super Bowls. No other team has that kind of record. So we're talking about total cultural change. Before 1970, when Terry Bradshaw joined the team, you went to the Steelers, they were a loser. You knew you were going to lose, and that's what happened. After Terry Bradshaw, you were a winner. You knew you were going to win, and that's what happened. Complete cultural change around one player. And so he's like my role model or my inspiration because I believe in the future, believe it or not, people might even be bragging about their kids with bipolar disorder because their access to the spiritual dimension and their capacity to heal other people will be finally recognized, you know. And
Exactly.
it could be a completely different interpretation of what's going on. It won't even be seen as mental illness. That's the way I see it.
I personally think a lot of mental illnesses are just spiritual or paranormal abilities that people don't recognize yet, and I think it's the next awakening, which is supposedly going to be a huge one. I think that's one of the things that's going to be recognized in the world, and I think it's one of the things that's going to slowly make its way out of the shadows and become a mainstream topic. And yes,
Well,
I know who Terry Bradshaw is. I There was a show on in 2016-18 called Better Late Than Never, where he traveled around the world with Shatner, Henry Winkler, and George Foreman, and it was just
ah,
one of the funniest fucking shows in history. Like it,
oh
he
wow, I would have
he
loved to see that show.
he you want to talk about getting naked and doing weird things. He literally, I forget, I think they were in France, I'm not sure, but he literally was in a park and he just stripped naked and like walked through the park.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
But but anything you want to say before we wrap up? Any message you want to give the world?
Sure. If you've got bipolar disorder out there and you're curious, please, um, if you're still reading out there, Bipolar Awakenings is my book. It's on Amazon. You can get it as a free PDF on my website, right? Along with my other book, Am I Bipolar or Waking Up? That's also a free PDF. The website is bipolarawakenings.com. And I've also got a training program there, and I'm starting to do some work online with people. That's very powerful. I'm doing distance healing work, which is even more woo woo. We haven't talked about that yet. Um, Very woo woo. I'm doing that this afternoon. And I'm training people in how to do breath work at home. But you need to have a supporter with you to protect you and give you empathy and these kind of things. So I'm training people to do the kind of retreat experience that I was doing with people in Europe and the U.S. I'm trying to teach people to do that in their own home if they've got the right supporter. Okay.
Well, there you go. And where can people find you and your books and everything else if they want to look into it?
It's all bipolarawakenings.com.
Oh, simple enough. And folks,
Simple enough.
that will of course be in the description for all you listeners, so you could click and go. And I want to thank Sean for coming on. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed the hell out of it, and
Oh, good.
I look forward to more people hearing this episode. And for his first time on a podcast, Sean freaking did a great job. So I'm happy. I'm happy to break a share, But but folks, you all know where you can find me. If you don't, goddamn shame. Check the outro. It's there. And if you're watching, you know where to find me because you're there already. But I have another interview right after this in about 5 minutes. So stick around, folks. I'll be back again. It's a
Thank
busy
you,
weekend.
Jeremy. Thank you for being my first rodeo.
Glad I could help, man. Glad I could be there to spread the message. And
All right. Wonderful.
I will see all you guys in a little bit. Have a good one.